The gunshot echoed through the rain-soaked alley before Clara Rodriguez even realized she was running. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she pressed the small boy against her chest, his trembling fingers clutching the fabric of her coat. Behind them, men shouted in Italian, their voices cutting through the downpour like knives. She didn't know how she'd gotten here, from a quiet data entry clerk to a woman fleeing armed men with a child she barely knew. But 3 months ago, everything had been different. 3 months ago, she'd been invisible. It started on a Tuesday night in October in Rosie's Diner on 5th and Camden. Clara sat in her usual booth, the ripped vinyl seat cold beneath her thighs, nursing her third cup of burnt coffee. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow. She'd just finished her shift at the insurance company, entering endless rows of numbers into spreadsheets until her eyes burned. This was her life now: work, diner, apartment, repeat. No friends. No family. Just the crushing weight of loneliness and the ghost of her younger brother, Miguel, who died 7 years ago at 14. She still blamed herself. Miguel had struggled with severe dyslexia, and their mother, working 3 jobs, hadn't had time to help him. Clara had been 21, too wrapped up in her own college stress to notice how far behind he was falling. By the time anyone realized how deeply he was hurting, how isolated and ashamed he felt, it was too late. He'd walked into traffic one rainy evening, and the police said it was an accident, but Clara knew better. The diner door chimed, pulling her from the memory. A small boy entered alone, maybe 8 or 9 years old, with dark curls plastered to his forehead from the rain. He wore expensive clothes, a designer jacket that looked out of place in this neighborhood, but his eyes held something Clara recognized immediately. Fear. Confusion. That desperate look of someone drowning in a world that refused to understand them. He slid into a booth across from hers, pulling out a stack of napkins and a pencil. Clara watched as he began scribbling frantically, his small hand gripping the pencil so hard his knuckles turned white. Words appeared on the napkin, jumbled, backwards, letters transposed. He crossed them out violently, tried again, failed again. His frustration radiated across the diner like heat. Clara's chest tightened. She saw Miguel in every frantic stroke, every crumpled napkin. The boy's eyes welled with tears. He was trying to write Dad, but it kept coming out as Dab, or Da, or a meaningless tangle of letters. Nobody in the diner seemed to notice or care. The waitress refilled coffee. The cook scraped the grill. The world kept spinning while this child suffered alone. Clara couldn't breathe. She couldn't let this happen again. She stood, her legs moving before her brain could stop them, and slid into the booth across from him. The boy looked up, startled, his dark eyes wide and wet. "Hi," Clara said softly. "I'm Clara. What are you trying to write?" The boy stared at her, suspicious and vulnerable at once. "My dad," he whispered. "I need to write Dad, but the letters won't. They keep moving." Clara's throat constricted. She knew exactly what he meant. "Can I show you something?" She took a clean napkin and drew a simple picture, a stick figure of a man with a crown. "This is a dad, right? A king of the family." She pointed to the D in her drawing, emphasizing its shape. "See how this letter looks like a belly? Round on one side." She drew it large and clear. Then she took his hand, so small in hers, and traced the letter on his palm with her finger. D for Dad. "Feel the shape." The boy's eyes widened. His breath caught. He picked up the pencil and, slowly, carefully, drew a D on the napkin. Then an A. Then another D. "Dad," he breathed, staring at the word like it was magic. A smile broke across his face, transforming him completely. "I did it. I wrote Dad." Clara felt tears spring to her eyes. "You did. You're brilliant." "Benedetto," the boy said suddenly. "My name is Benedetto." Before Clara could respond, the diner door burst open. 3 men in expensive suits entered, their presence immediately changing the atmosphere. They weren't violent, but they moved with the kind of confidence that came from knowing they could be. The lead man was tall, broad-shouldered, with salt and pepper hair and eyes that could cut glass. His gaze swept the diner and landed on Benedetto with instant relief, then concern, then something harder when he saw Clara. "Benedetto," the man said, his voice low and commanding. "You left the car." The boy clutched the napkin with Dad written on it. "Papa, I wrote it." "Look, I wrote Dad." He held it up triumphantly, and for just a moment, the hard man's expression crumbled into something raw and beautiful. If you're finding yourself moved by Benedetto's struggle and Clara's compassion, drop a comment below about a teacher or mentor who changed your life. I'd love to hear your stories, and I know others would too. The man approached the booth slowly, like he was approaching a wild animal. When he reached them, he looked at the napkin, then at Clara, then back at his son. "You did this?" he asked Benedetto. "She helped me, Papa." "Clara. She showed me how to see the letters differently." The man's eyes locked onto Clara's, and she felt the weight of that gaze like a physical thing. "You taught him this?" Clara's mouth went dry. I just showed him a different method. For dyslexia." The man was silent for a long moment, studying her face. Then he extended his hand. "Anthony Varon. This is my son." Clara's blood ran cold. Everyone in New Harbor City knew that name. Anthony Varon controlled half the city's underground. The docks, the unions, the politicians who pretended they weren't in his pocket. He was the monster parents threatened their children with. And she'd just inserted herself into his world. "Clara Rodriguez," she managed, shaking his hand. His grip was firm, but not threatening. "You've done something tutors and specialists couldn't," Anthony said quietly. "You got through to him." He glanced at Benedetto, who was drawing more letters on napkins, his face alight with joy. His mother died 4 years ago. Since then, he's struggled. The dyslexia makes him feel stupid, and I don't know how to help him. Clara saw the pain in this dangerous man's eyes and recognized it. Grief. Helplessness. The same things she'd felt watching Miguel slip away. "He's not stupid," Clara said firmly. "His brain just works differently. It's actually a gift. Dyslexic people often see patterns and connections others miss. They're usually incredibly creative." Anthony absorbed this like a man dying of thirst. "Would you?" He paused, seeming to weigh his words carefully. "Would you consider teaching him? Privately. I'd pay whatever you want." Clara should have said no. Should have run from this booth and never looked back. But then Benedetto looked up at her with those hopeful eyes, and she saw Miguel again, and she heard herself say, "I need to understand what I'm getting into." "Honestly," Anthony said, "danger. My world isn't safe, Miss Rodriguez. But my son needs you. I can see that." He pulled out a card with a phone number. "Think about it. If you decide yes, call this number. If no, I understand, but please don't tell anyone about Benedetto. His existence, his challenges, they make him vulnerable to people who'd use him against me." Clara took the card, her hand shaking. Anthony gathered Benedetto, who waved goodbye to her with a smile so bright it hurt. Then they were gone, leaving Clara alone with cold coffee and a decision that would change everything. She told herself she'd throw the card away. She almost did 3 times. But each night, sitting in that empty apartment with Miguel's photo on the mantel, she felt the weight of her failure pressing down. She'd let her brother drown. She wouldn't let it happen to Benedetto. 3 days later, she called the number. The Varon mansion sat on the outskirts of New Harbor City, surrounded by high walls and iron gates. When Clara's taxi dropped her at the entrance, 2 armed guards checked her ID before letting her through. The house itself was beautiful, a sprawling estate with manicured gardens and marble fountains, but Clara could feel the tension beneath the elegance. This was a fortress, not a home. Anthony met her at the door, his expression unreadable. "Miss Rodriguez, thank you for coming." "Clara, please," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. He led her through hallways lined with expensive art, past rooms where men in suits spoke in low voices, up a grand staircase to the 3rd floor. Benedetto's room was at the end of a long corridor, away from the rest of the house. When Anthony opened the door, Clara understood why. The room was a sanctuary. Every wall was covered in drawings, landscapes, animals, abstract swirls of color. Benedetto sat at a desk by the window, sketching in a notebook. When he saw Clara, his face lit up like sunrise. "Clara, Papa said you'd come. You're going to teach me?" She smiled, her fears momentarily forgotten. "If you'll have me." Over the following weeks, Clara fell into a routine that felt surreal. She'd arrive at the mansion each morning, spend hours with Benedetto in his room, teaching him through art and symbols. She created a visual alphabet where each letter connected to a drawing. S was a snake, B was a butterfly, M was mountains. Benedetto absorbed everything, his confidence growing daily. But Clara couldn't ignore the world outside that room. She heard raised voices in the night, saw men with guns patrolling the grounds. Once, she passed a room where Anthony was interrogating someone, his voice cold and merciless. It terrified her, but it also revealed something unexpected, the vast gulf between the father Benedetto knew and the boss everyone else feared. Anthony began joining their lessons. At first, he just watched from the doorway, but gradually he started participating. Clara taught him the same techniques, and she watched this hard, violent man struggle to understand his son's world. The vulnerability in his eyes during those moments was staggering. "I never knew," Anthony said one afternoon after Benedetto ran off to show the cook his latest drawing. "I never understood it wasn't about intelligence. I kept pushing him to read normal books, use normal methods, thinking he just needed to try harder." Clara sat across from him in the study, rain pattering against the windows. "Most people don't understand. They see the symptoms, not the person." Anthony looked at her intently. "You understand because of your brother." She froze. "How do you?" "I make it my business to know who's in my home," Anthony said gently. "Miguel Rodriguez. Died 7 years ago. Severe dyslexia, depression. You blame yourself." Tears sprang to Clara's eyes. "I should have helped him. Should have noticed sooner." "You were a child yourself," Anthony said quietly. "Just 21. Working, studying. You can't carry that guilt forever, Clara." She met his eyes and saw genuine compassion there. This man, this criminal, understood her pain in a way no one else ever had. "Benedetto talks about you constantly," Anthony continued. "You've given him something I couldn't, confidence. Hope." He's smiling again. His voice cracked slightly. "You gave me my son back." The moment stretched between them, charged with something Clara didn't want to name. She stood abruptly. "I should check on Benedetto." But as she left, she felt Anthony's gaze following her, and she knew something had shifted. This wasn't just a job anymore. 2 months into her time at the mansion, Clara had become part of the strange family within those walls. The guards nodded to her. The staff asked her opinion on meals for Benedetto. And Anthony looked at her like she was something precious and fragile. One Saturday, he surprised them both. "I'm taking you to an art exhibit," he announced at breakfast. "Downtown. Real paintings by real artists. Benedetto should see what professionals do." Benedetto was ecstatic, bouncing in his seat. Clara was nervous. Public outings felt dangerous, but Anthony assured her they'd have security. The gallery was beautiful, filled with light and color. Benedetto ran from painting to painting, Clara following, explaining techniques and styles. For a few hours, they were just a family enjoying art. Anthony walked beside them, his hand occasionally brushing Clara's lower back, his eyes soft when he looked at his son. "Thank you for this," Clara said quietly while Benedetto examined a massive abstract piece. "For what?" Anthony asked. "Letting me be part of this. Part of his life." Anthony turned to her, his expression intense. "Clara, you're not just part of his life. You're..." The glass ceiling exploded. Men in black tactical gear rappelled down into the gallery, automatic weapons raised. Screams erupted. People ran in all directions. Anthony's guards immediately surrounded them, returning fire, but they were outnumbered. Clara grabbed Benedetto, pulling him behind a marble pillar as bullets chewed through priceless paintings. The boy was screaming, trembling, his hands over his ears. Clara wrapped herself around him, making her body a shield. "It's okay," Baby, I've got you, she chanted, even as terror clawed at her throat. Anthony was fighting, his gun drawn, his face transformed into something terrifying. He was a predator unleashed. But there were too many attackers. One broke through the line, grabbing Benedetto's arm and yanking hard. Clara held on, screaming, but something slammed into her shoulder. A bullet, she realized dimly, and her grip loosened. The man tore Benedetto from her arms. Papa! Benedetto shrieked. Anthony spun, his face contorting with rage and fear. He shot the man holding Benedetto, but another grabbed the boy, dragging him toward the shattered skylight. Clara tried to stand, to run after them, but her legs wouldn't hold her. Blood soaked her shirt. Benedetto! Anthony roared, but it was too late. They were gone, vanished into vehicles that screeched away from the gallery. Anthony ran to Clara, his hands pressing against her wound. Stay with me, Clara. Ambulance is coming. Find him, Clara gasped. Please, Anthony, find him. Anthony's eyes were wild, filled with a fury that could burn the city down. I will. I swear to God, I will. Hit the subscribe button if you want to see how this story ends, because what comes next will test everything they've built together, and not everyone will make it out alive. Clara woke in a bedroom at the mansion, her shoulder bandaged, her body screaming with pain. A doctor had removed the bullet, Anthony's personal physician, who asked no questions. Through the window, she could see dawn breaking over New Harbor City, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. Benedetto, she croaked. His expression hardened. Angelo Cesare. Rival family. He took Benedetto to get to me, to force me to cede territory, to make me look weak. Anthony's hands clenched into fists. He sent a message. Said Benedetto's disability proves I'm raising a weak heir. That I'm finished. Rage like Clara had never known flooded through her. Where is he? My people are searching every warehouse, every safe house. We'll find him. How long has it been? 16 hours. 16 hours. Clara's mind raced, imagining Benedetto alone, terrified, unable to read instructions or signs if he needed to escape. But then something clicked. The symbols, she said suddenly. What? Benedetto and I created symbols, a whole language of drawings for different words and concepts. If he could mark them somewhere, leave a trail. She sat up despite the pain lancing through her shoulder. Anthony, if he's trying to communicate, it would be in pictures, not words. Anthony stared at her, then grabbed his phone, barking orders. Check everything. Not for writing, for drawings. Scratches on walls, marks in dust, anything. 20 minutes later, they had it. One of Anthony's scouts had been canvassing an abandoned warehouse near the docks and noticed crude scratches on a metal door, symbols that meant nothing to him, but everything to Clara. When he sent photos, her heart nearly stopped. That's our symbol for water, she breathed, pointing at a wavy line. And that one means night. And this is scared. Her voice broke. He's leaving messages. He's trying to tell us where he is and that he's afraid. Anthony's expression transformed into something beautiful and terrible at once. The old cannery. Near the water, abandoned at night. He was already moving, shouting orders into his phone. Every man, every gun. Now. I'm coming with you, Clara said. No. You're injured. He'll be terrified. He'll need me. She stood, swaying but determined. I'm coming, Anthony. He looked at her, really looked at her, and something passed between them. Understanding. Respect. Love, maybe, though neither would say it yet. Stay behind me. Always. They moved through the pre-dawn streets in a convoy of black SUVs, the city still sleeping. Clara's shoulder throbbed, but adrenaline pushed the pain aside. All she could think about was Benedetto's face, when they'd taken him, the terror in his eyes. The cannery loomed against the gray sky, rusted and skeletal. Anthony's men surrounded it silently, communicating through hand signals. Clara stayed close to Anthony, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might burst. They breached the main door with brutal efficiency. Inside, The building was a maze of conveyor belts and old machinery, shadows pooling in every corner. Clara saw more symbols scratched into metal and concrete, Benedetto's breadcrumbs leading deeper into the structure. Then they heard it, a child's scream cut short. Anthony moved like lightning, his men flowing behind him. They burst into a central room where Angelo Cesare stood over Benedetto, a gun pointed at the boy's head. Benedetto's face was bruised, his clothes torn, but his eyes sparked with defiance. "Varon," Angelo laughed, though there was sweat on his brow. "Finally. I was beginning to think you didn't care about your defective son." "Let him go," Anthony said, his voice death itself. "Now. Or what? You'll kill me?" Angelo pressed the gun harder against Benedetto's temple. "Your dynasty ends here, Varon. Your weak, stupid son proves you're—" "He's not stupid," Clara said, stepping forward despite Anthony's restraining hand. "He's brilliant. Smarter than you'll ever be." Angelo's eyes swung to her, surprised. "And who the hell are you?" "I'm his teacher," Clara said clearly. "And Benedetto, remember what we practiced? The symbol for duck?" Benedetto's eyes widened. He understood. The symbol for duck was their signal for getting low, fast. Without hesitation, the boy dropped like a stone. Angelo's gun swung down, but Anthony was already firing. The warehouse erupted in gunfire. Clara threw herself behind a steel pillar, her ears ringing. Through the chaos, she saw Benedetto crawling toward her, his small body navigating the maze of machinery. "Come on, baby, come on," she whispered, reaching out. He crashed into her arms, and she held him tight, covering his ears as the violence raged. "I've got you. I've got you." When the shooting stopped, Angelo Cesare lay dead, and Anthony stood over him, his gun still raised. Clara saw the monster everyone feared in that moment, the cold, merciless killer. But then Anthony turned, saw Benedetto safe in Clara's arms, and the humanity flooded back into his eyes. He dropped to his knees beside them, pulling them both into his arms. "My son.
My boy.
You're safe. You're safe." Benedetto sobbed into his father's chest. "I used the symbols, Papa. Like Clara taught me. I left messages." "You did so good," Anthony said, his voice breaking. "So good, Benedetto." Clara felt tears streaming down her face as she held them both. This broken family that had somehow become hers. The ride back to the mansion was silent, except for Benedetto's soft snores. He'd fallen asleep against Clara, exhausted by trauma and relief. Anthony drove, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his jaw tight. "Thank you," he said finally, "for saving him, for teaching him how to save himself." "He's saved himself," Clara said quietly. "I just gave him the tools." Anthony glanced at her, his eyes soft despite everything. "You gave us both more than tools, Clara. You gave us hope." Back at the mansion, they cleaned Benedetto up and put him to bed. The boy refused to let go of Clara's hand until he was fully asleep. She sat beside him, stroking his hair, watching his chest rise and fall. Anthony stood in the doorway, watching them. When Clara finally stood, careful not to wake Benedetto, Anthony took her hand and led her to his study. "I need to say something," he said, closing the door, "before I lose my courage." Clara's heart raced. "Anthony, I'm a monster, Clara. I've done terrible things. I'll probably do more before I die." His eyes glistened. "But you and Benedetto, you make me want to be better. You make me remember I'm human." He stepped closer. "I love you. I know I have no right to say that, but I do. You brought light into this dark house, and I can't let you go." Clara's breath caught. She should run. Should leave this dangerous world. But when she looked at Anthony, she didn't see a monster. She saw a father who'd fought through hell for his son. A man who'd learned to draw pictures and trace letters on a child's palm. A person who'd cracked open his armored heart and let her in. "I love you too," she whispered. "Both of you. This broken, beautiful family." Anthony pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a desperation that spoke of almost losing everything. When they finally broke apart, Both were crying. 3 weeks later, Clara moved into the mansion permanently. She'd quit her data entry job, said goodbye to her tiny apartment, and stepped fully into this new life. One evening, Benedetto appeared in the study where Clara and Anthony were reviewing his schoolwork. He held a small book, handmade, the pages filled with drawings and carefully written words. "I made this for you," Benedetto said shyly, handing it to Clara. She opened it, tears immediately blurring her vision. Every page showed their journey together, the diner, the lessons, the symbols they'd created. And on the last page, in Benedetto's improving handwriting, were 4 words. "Thank you for teaching me how to speak." Clara couldn't breathe through the emotion. She pulled Benedetto into her arms, kissing the top of his head. "Oh, sweetheart, you always had a voice. I just helped you find it." Anthony watched them, his expression full of wonder. That night, after Benedetto was asleep, he found Clara on the terrace overlooking the gardens. "Marry me," he said simply. Clara turned, surprised. "What?" "Marry me, Clara. Not because you work for me, or because Benedetto needs you, but because I need you. Because I want to spend whatever time I have left being the man you make me want to be." Clara looked at this complicated, dangerous, beautiful man and saw her future. Not the safe, lonely future she'd resigned herself to, but something fierce and real and full of love. "Yes," she said. "Yes, Anthony. I'll marry you." They married quietly 6 months later in the mansion's garden, with Benedetto as the ring bearer. He'd drawn their wedding invitations himself, beautiful images of 2 people holding hands with a small boy between them. Clara Rodriguez had walked into that diner expecting another night of loneliness and coffee. Instead, she'd found a child who needed her, a man who loved her, and a second chance to save the person she'd failed to save before. She'd learned that families weren't always born. Sometimes they were built from symbols and patience and love. And sometimes the most broken people could create the most beautiful things when given the chance to be understood. As she danced with Anthony while Benedetto watched, laughing, Clara felt Miguel's memory settle peacefully in her heart. She hadn't been able to save her brother, but she'd honored his memory by saving someone else's. And in a mansion full of danger and darkness, she'd found her light. Before you go, share the story with someone who needs to hear that it's never too late to make a difference in someone's life, because compassion has a ripple effect that can change everything.